If you've been managing type 2 diabetes for more than a year and your numbers still aren't where they should be, I can tell you exactly what's going on. And listen, it has nothing to do with what you're eating or how much exercise you do. They gave you a blood sugar target, maybe a prescription or a pamphlet about decreasing carbs. But if your energy is still low, if your weight is still there, and you're doing everything that they told you to do and the disease is still running, showing high numbers, even after working with diabetic patients for over 22 years, I found a pattern that shows up over and over and over again. And once you know what to look for, it almost becomes impossible to miss. Look, there are 3 systems in your body that generate insulin resistance completely independent of diet and exercise. Most type 2 diabetic patients never get tested for any of them. And the one that's going to surprise you the most, nobody expects it because it has nothing to do with your blood sugars at all. So listen, in today's video, I'm going to walk you through 3 upstream sources that conventional diabetic doctors almost never investigate. I'm going to show you how to identify which ones are active in your body, and I'm going to give you something practical that you can do today. And it begins with this concept. Your organ systems that are controlling blood sugar have nothing to do with your pancreas, because watch, your body runs a background operating system that you never have to think about, which regulates your blood sugar. It controls your organs, your hormones, your digestion, even including how much your pancreas produces insulin. So if there's an interference in that process, no amount of diet or exercise or carb restrictions will ever fix it. So remember, you can't eat your way out of a neurological problem. And here's where it gets very interesting. The interference that disrupts pancreatic output usually doesn't cause any symptoms. No back pain, no neck pain. It's a metabolic dysfunction that looks exactly like a lifestyle-driven diabetes disease. Remember, your brainstem at the very top of your cervical spine is the vagus nerve and your primary vagal response. It is the relay station for the communication that regulates everything that goes through your pancreas. The vagus nerve, right here in the upper cervical vertebra, the top 2 bones in your neck, if they're out of alignment, a miscommunication, a disruption occurs, and the vagal nerve cannot communicate to the organ. Look, I had a patient who came to me after 40 years of being type 2 diabetic, medications almost for the last 22 years. He tried to deal with every diet, every doctor's recommendation, and within just 90 days of starting a functional medicine structural chiropractic protocol that addresses nervous system interference along with upstream sources of what I'm going to cover to you today, boom, no longer needing medication. Just 90 days. We have labs that confirmed it. 40 years managing numbers, 40 years popping pills, 40 years and the underlying cause was never touched. So look, when you start treating your nervous system as part of the metabolic equation, you actually stop chasing after all the numbers and all the stuff that it's generating. And that, just so you know, is a functionally different approach towards diabetes. So let's look at the next system in your body. Why your gut could be silently sabotaging your insulin and you would never even know it because there's no digestive symptoms. So here's what makes this tricky. You can actually have a gut problem driving your blood sugars for years and never feel it as acid reflux, indigestion, or any stomach symptoms. So when your gut lining is compromised, something we called increased intestinal permeability or leaky gut, there's particles that should stay inside your intestinal tract and they leak into your bloodstream. I'm talking about things like lipopolysaccharides, LPS, look it up. These are bacterial toxins, tiny fragments of bacteria. You can even leak partially digested food proteins and activate something called molecular mimicry, which causes an autoimmunity. So your immune system sees all of these things as foreign, and it's going to respond in a chronically inflamed state. Chronic inflammation at the cellular level, it's what blocks insulin from working. So your cells literally stop listening to the insulin message. So what happens is your blood sugar rises, and because that rises, your compensation is more insulin from your pancreas, and eventually that system keeps flowing, so it gets so bad the diagnosis occurs. Type 2 diabetic, pre-diabetic. Here's the problem. Your gut could be waging a silent war against your insulin receptors for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, well before your doctors say you're a diabetic. Look, gut permeability does not show up on a standard lab test. You can't run blood work and find gut leak. You'll see diabetes, you'll see the high A1C, but the fire that's burning that no one's measuring is in the gut. And remember, when the gut lining is repaired, the leak stops, the lipopolysaccharides, the undigested food particles, they stop getting into the blood, and your insulin receptors start working, so blood sugars start responding. Look, I want you to think of insulin as like a key. So it fits into a lock. When inflammation is consistent, it's almost like somebody jammed gum into the lock and the key doesn't fit. And because it doesn't fit, you can't open the door. And because the door's not open, sugar doesn't go into the cell. So your pancreas just sits there cranking out insulin all day long and nothing happens. So the moment you remove the obstruction, that's when things change. That's what happens at a cellular level when you drop your inflammatory load. So when you treat your gut integrity as part of a metabolic process, you're now addressing the second most common and most overlooked upstream source of type 2 diabetes, insulin resistance, and prediabetes. Now to the third system. And this is one that most people have never discussed in the context of diabetes. It may have been building inside of you for a long time. And before we do that system, if what you're hearing is landing with you, like if this feels like a completely different conversation on how to look at managing a condition that you've been dealing with for years without any resolutions, I would love for you to subscribe to this channel. Every week we go into the deep root causes that conventional medicine is not even looking at. So hit subscribe, activate the bell. You don't want to miss what's next. Okay, number 3. The toxins that build up that your doctors have never tested for that are driving your diabetes, and it could have been going on for decades. Look, most people with type 2 diabetes have never been evaluated for a toxic burden, which means that the source generating the insulin resistance may have been accumulating inside of them for decades. And here's the part that surprises most people. It's not always obvious, okay? It could be things that your doctors never considered. Like, for example, do you eat farm-raised fish instead of wild-caught? Are you drinking direct tap water or are you filtering it? Maybe it's your produce that's not clean enough, so it looks good, right? I eat fruits and vegetables. It looks like you're doing everything right. But think back through your life for a second. Were you ever raised in an area that maybe was agricultural or near a golf course? What about an industrial site? Were they building buildings around you? Did you live in a house that was built before 1980, maybe even in the 1900s and had lead paint? Have you had significant exposure to pesticides or herbicides over the years because you don't think non-organic foods are a big deal? So look, if you eat farm-raised fish, you drink standard city water, and you do all the conventional stuff, what happens is heavy metals, pesticides, environmental plastics, industrial chemicals, where they're going to accumulate inside of you. And they tend to hang out in fatty tissue and they disrupt insulin messaging at the cellular level. So your pancreatic function can be altered because of these toxins. And the thing is, guys, they don't show up on standard medical labs. They're never in the conversation, especially about blood sugar management. I mean, think about it. When is the last time your medical doctor said, hey, let's talk about blood sugar management and toxic load? Never. So here's what happens. Heavy metals, pesticides, environmental plastics, even industrial chemicals, where they're all going to accumulate inside your body over time. And they go for your fatty organ tissues like your pancreas. So they disrupt the direct insulin messaging at the cellular level, and pancreatic function can often become overstimulated. This is why insulin is usually extremely high in type 2 diabetics, yet their blood sugar is also high. They don't show up on standard labs. And they almost never come up in a conversation with your doctor, especially about blood sugar management. So look, I want you to ask these 3 questions, okay? Number 1, have you ever had your heavy metals tested, specifically mercury, lead, and arsenic? They're known to interfere with the insulin receptor. Do you experience brain fog, chronic fatigue, or unexplained weight resistance? You just can't lose weight no matter how hard you work at it. And that's a blood sugar issue because of toxins. Have you been treated for diabetes for more than 5 years, taking prescriptive medications with only a tiny bit of improvement, despite doing everything medically right? Look, if you answered yes to one or more of those, toxic burden is certainly a part of the metabolic picture that you need to address. Now, can you see that all the upstream systems, your nervous system, the interference of subluxation, your gut permeability, the toxic burden, these questions become this: where do you start? How do you know which one you have? And that leads to point number 4. The most important thing you can do is have lab tests that reveal the root cause of your insulin resistance. By the way, A1C is not going to do that. Even fasting blood sugar won't do that. So the first move after being diagnosed with diabetes is not to adjust your diet or add another medication. It is identifying which upstream system is generating your insulin resistance. So look, every dietary change, every pharmaceutical intervention, those are downstream adjustments. Finding the source is the only move that gives you a real shot at resolving type 2 diabetes instead of just managing it. So remember the patient that I mentioned earlier, the one with 40 years of type 2 diabetes? So he didn't fail at managing his condition. Technically, he succeeded. He was keeping his numbers on track, but nothing changed because the source was never identified. When the upstream 3 systems were evaluated and addressed using the right sequence over just 90 days, boom, body began to correct itself. Comes off medications. It's not because it was some sort of exceptional outcome. It was just what is possible when you ask the right question and you find the right answer and you apply the right treatment. So here's what I want you to stop doing right now. Stop treating your fasting glucose number and your A1C as the problem. Lowering A1C doesn't fix anything. That number is just an output. Chasing the output without finding what's generating the issue is a condition that medical physicians do all the time. So here's what you should do instead. The very first thing I do is get a structural evaluation of the upper cervical spine from someone trained, specifically someone who knows how to look for neurological subluxations and can detect if the nervous system is interfered with. That's the exact point that I discussed in number 1 earlier. That assessment should come before your labs because it tells the provider and you exactly what's going on neurologically, because if your vagus nerve can't talk to your pancreas, good luck with detoxing, diet, and exercise. Then, these are the 3 labs that you need to ask for. They're not on a standard medical workup. 1, fasting insulin. It tells us everything about how much insulin your body is holding on to in your blood. Number 2, high sensitivity CRP, cardiac reactive protein. It's a marker of global inflammation. Number 3, a heavy metal panel. Those 3 results right there will tell you about the upstream source involved in your insulin resistance way more than fasting sugars and A1C will. Okay, once you know the upstream systems that are affected, now you can begin to take specific action. You can even do it right now to address all 3 of them. Okay, because here's my 5th point of this video. Every single day you're being exposed to things. Every pathway in your body that's responsible for clearing toxins is competing against an incoming load of your lifestyle. When the incoming load drops, your body will begin to start clearing itself and function can begin again. Okay, for most people, the 2 biggest daily sources of toxic interruptants is the water they drink and the non-organic processed conventional foods they eat. So both of these are things you can address today. Not a prescription, not a program even, not even waiting for an appointment. The action steps you can do today are these 4. Number 1, switch your drinking and cooking water to something highly filtered, a reverse osmosis filter, a countertop carbon filter that gives you high quality water. And if you do this, do it now, like today. Okay, number 2, at your evening meal, make sure you have a side of high fiber vegetables that you add to your plate. Why? Fiber binds toxins in your digestive tract and carries them out before they get reabsorbed. It's one of the simplest detox actions you can take right now. Okay, number 3, 3 grams of high quality omega-3 fatty acids. Think like a fish oil supplement. They reduce inflammation, and that's the issue that's blocking the insulin receptor. If we can sort of open the insulin receptor so it's not so swollen and irritated, you affect the direct upstream support for insulin, and it is support for your gut, which is a system we talked about earlier. Okay, number 4. Right now, before you go to sleep tonight, spend 10 minutes in a position that supports your cervical spine in its neutral alignment. Don't use any pillows. Lie flat on your back. No devices in your hands. What you want to do is reduce the compressive stress on your brainstem. And we talked about that in point number 1. Take a towel, roll it up in a small tube, put it on your neck, grab it, pull. Keep your skull on the bed, lay down, and release the stress in your spine. Okay, listen, the diagnosis of type 2 diabetes, this is something no one's going to talk about. Where does it come from? The system that's managing your condition, the doctors, the pharmacies, healthcare, they're not designed to look upstream. But look, your body was built with an extraordinary healing capacity. The upstream systems that disrupt the capacity can be there silently for decades, and they don't show up with standard conventional exams. So remember, finding the upstream interference, now you know where to look, and there's already a lot of videos that are on this channel right now that you can go deeper into the inflammatory mechanisms that we discovered today. Some of them are about your cardiovascular inflammation. Look at the video we did called Your Cardiologist is Focused on Your Cholesterol, but that's the problem. Your gut connection, the inflammatory load, neural subluxations, these are upstream sources that standard medical labs will never measure. And remember, functional medicine is about coming from a different angle. And it'll make everything we covered today click into place when you understand how to decrease your toxicity, your inflammation, seal your gut, and remove your subluxations. Look, there's a video linked for you right here. Watch that one next.